Welcome to CFO 4.0, the future of finance. The CFO role is changing rapidly, moving from cost controller to strategic visionary. And with every change comes opportunity. We are here to help you take advantage of this transition, to win at work, drive your career forwards, and lead with confidence. Join Hannah Munro, Managing Director of ITAS, a financial transformation consultancy, as she interviews key experts to give you real-world advice and guidance on how to transform your processes, people, and data. Welcome to CFO 4.0, the future of finance.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. With me today is Alex Ladd, who is the CEO at Mindstream Analytics. So welcome, Alex. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up at Mindstream Analytics?
Well, Mindstream Analytics is actually a company I founded. I was working for another company, and we were really, I don't know if people remember all this, the software called Hyperion. Many financial people probably remember it fondly, but it was I was working for a small boutique firm years and years ago, and it was when Hyperion was acquired by Oracle. A lot of the big ERP players wanted to buy up a lot of the boutiques that were implementing Hyperion. So the company I was at was sold. And it was right in 2008, towards the end of 2008, when the economy kind of changed right after the sale. So after about a year, I decided it made the integration a little interesting. And after a year, I decided I kind of wanted to go do my own thing. I had a mentor who told me to do that. And so I did. And that's where Mindstream Analytics was born.
Amazing. And obviously, you've seen quite a few technology projects over the years. So, stepping back and looking at that, where do you see the common themes around mistakes and issues with implementing technology?
I think that there's a couple different things that ring out. One would be that it's everyone I think thinks that they're going to hire a consultant to do all of this for them, but the underlying the dirty secret, I guess, is that we can't read your mind. So you really have to be involved. So that involvement really is key. The more a customer is involved with and in the project and shaping it, the more it'll be what they want. So involvement is by leaps and bounds the biggest thing. The other thing that I think that people have to be honest about with themselves is their data. What does their data really look like when they go into it, and kind of that's going to determine a lot going forward, right? And so if you're hiding from yourself, thinking that your data is fine when in the back of your mind it probably is not, then you probably need to think about the fact that this is going to take a while. That those are the two biggest pieces. I think the other thing is as you get forward, new technology can do new things. So take advantage of those new things. Don't be afraid to change things as you move forward. You get a lot of customers who, I do this now. I just want to do the same thing in the new technology. Well, like, why are you buying the new technology then? So, if you're not going to take advantage of what it can do for you, especially now as you get into like things with AI and machine learning and stuff like that. So for finance, for finance professionals, you should be taking advantage of machine learning. And whether, a lot of people will say, well, it's not good for our industry and things like that. That's not true. I mean, when you get into machine learning, you're going to end up with little models for lots of different pieces. And as you go through that, no matter what industry you're in, there's something that'll fit it, and you probably should take advantage of it. So those are the big things, but don't be afraid of the new technology and changing the way you're doing things, because that is huge. And I think that brings me to my last piece, which is if you are going to change things, don't back away from change management, because projects succeed or fail with change management. In management.
Absolutely. And I think this is So many good points. So let's just explore some of those topics, because actually, like, I feel like I'm literally listening to a mirror image of myself talking. I think I literally have said those 4 things on a recent presentation. So
Mhm.
this is, so it's always quite funny when you hear that recited back.
Mhm.
so
Exactly.
so tell me a little bit about how you assess data quality. What are some of the things that you're looking at within a customer's data set to know whether they're sort of ready for that transformation and change piece?
You know what? That's a really good question because it's not always about the data quality itself.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of companies will have data issues, but you talk to the CFO or the controller, and it's like we don't have any data issues. We publish our quarterly numbers on time, and they're accurate and everything like that. And then okay, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a data issue because if you if you're publishing those numbers and it's taking a small army of people to check them and recheck them and recheck them and recheck them to get them right, then you have a data problem. The question is, how much manipulation are you having to do from getting the, like, if you're publishing your quarterly financials, if you're getting this information out of your general ledger, what's the next step and how terrifying and difficult is it? And if it's really difficult, then you probably have some kind of data problem, because it shouldn't be theoretically that hard, right? So I really assess more, not necessarily on the data itself, but more on kind of the process around the data, right? Because if the process around the data is truly cumbersome, then the data is not that clean.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I have a lot of conversations where people are like, well, no, because I pull the data out, I manipulate it, then I push it back into the GL. And I'm like, yeah, you just created an industry around corrections and journals. So actually,
Right,
one of the big questions I always say, well, how can we get it in right in the first place? You don't have to
right,
wait till the end of the month to get it correct.
right. Right. Well, the
Um,
other thing comes back to control, right? I mean, you
yeah.
talk about like, Sarbanes-Oxley, like SOX controls and things like that. Like, if you
Mhm.
have a potential SOX governance issue where like too many people have too much access to the data or something like that, that right there should be kind of the red flag. Like, hey, wait a minute, we've got too much, manipulation going on. What's the problem, right? So, those are kind of the things that kind of get to you. So,
Well, I'm going to pick you up on that because, like, one of the golden rules on the podcast I was told when I first started was not to use acronyms. So, for
oh,
those
sorry,
that
sorry.
don't know, for
Well,
those that don't know what SOX is, come and explain. It's not what you put in your feed, guys, just to set the
yes,
record straight. So
yes.
tell us a little bit about SOX.
It's really around in the U.S. the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and compliance around that. So there's a lot of regulations around governance of the data, controls, process controls, things like that. So and I'm sure if you've met an auditor, they will talk about it and tell you a lot more than I can. But it's a lot around governance and things like that. And that those governance things are real though, because obviously you don't want everybody manipulating your data that shouldn't be, and you want to be able to have a repeatable process and things like that to ensure accuracy. And so that's really kind of what we're talking about.
And the piece I would just say to everyone listening is that SOX piece. We've actually had quite a few customers where they've got a US entity, and so they're starting to apply those principles across the wider group. So it's not just the US that this is starting to hit.
Yeah.
It's also those related entities as well. So, and while we're on the topic, what are some of the things we can do to make that reporting process SOX compliant? What sorts of things should we be thinking about?
I think anything I mean, and this actually, before I get to that, one of the things that you think about with this is it actually should help you because it should actually really, if you do it well, it should kind of decrease the cost of your audit, right? Because if everything is, really where you want something is audit controls, right? So if everything is auditable, if you can record every step that people are making and show that this came from here and that came from there, and that's why they go together. So if you can lay it out simply for people, then it will be, it will pass, a SOC audit or something like that, right? And the other thing is it'll pass your auditors too, right? So it should theoretically save you money by once you set it up. Because if your audit is, takes less time, then obviously it'll cost less, right? So, I mean, there are benefits to this, not just kind of, well, people will believe my numbers more. Well, people probably believe them anyway because your auditor says they're good. But the truth of the matter is that this will, it'll make it simpler so people will have more faith in it. But your auditor will actually have more faith in it, and then probably reduce the cost of your audit.
Yeah, and there's lots of benefits as well, because some of it, I do feel like some of the legislation you get is just common sense, isn't it? So having ways to track, yeah, it should be. I think good legislation is
Yeah.
common sense written
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah, I can't say that about all legislation, but that one is, that I'll hold up with that one.
So just thinking about how editable things like reports are within your business, because that's one of the challenges, isn't it? When you've got these massive spreadsheets, and I've seen some beauties. I don't know whether to be horrified or amazed when I see some spreadsheets that my customers
Exactly, because some of them really are like works of art, like the calculations and all the linkages and things like that. And you look at that, you're amazed at the amount of work hours that went into that, right?
Yeah, and then you think about the amount of work hours it took somebody to actually check that every cell calculated right, and then you realize, and that's what it's about, isn't it? It's just about adding robustness into the reporting process and understanding where you've got weaknesses in that reporting chain to make it more effective.
Exactly, and people hate to invest in. Finance is the same with HR and things like that. They're overhead departments. They're not revenue generating. They don't produce products. I understand that, but at some point they need some investment too, right? And so, you were saying the common sense piece, but at the same time, it is common sense. But at the same time, you still have to write a check to put it in, right? You still have to, invest in it to get it out of the Excel world, which people are, they don't like to do, and I get that. I don't either. So, but at the same time, it's something that has to happen, and it does have benefits down the road, right? So
100%. And I always find it interesting that finance is always at the end of the investment cycle. So, sales have all their beauty, marketing have all these marketing automation systems and sales, and you go in and the finance team are still working on DOS, right? It's gotten that bad. So, someone's still filing some paper onto a shelf into a file box, and you go, okay, maybe we need to bring finance up to the same level as the rest of the organization. Oh, I'd just be interested, what's your thoughts on that? Do you see that trend as well yourself, and any ideas why that is? Why is finance so underinvested in as a department within the organization?
I think there are a few reasons. One, like I said, it's not revenue generating and things like that, right? So there's those kind of easy ones, like it doesn't generate revenue, it doesn't, whatever. And then, but also, I think that there is I think that it's also a little bit of a badge of honor for the finance team. The finance team, most finance teams that you meet are extremely hardworking people, and they almost wear it as a badge of honor that that they don't have the best stuff, but they still get the job done. You know what I mean? There's this kind of ethos or what have you within the finance community that they don't need all the fancy bells and whistles that sales has or something like that, right? It's almost they're pure, or there's something that they it really is there, though. It's in the psyche of finance to really think that way or whatnot. So I think that is actually part of it. And the other thing is, and this is not for nothing, is that finance is one of those areas that they're doing things. They look forward and they look back, right? So you're when you think about actuals and things like that, that's historic. It's looking backwards, right? But then they're looking at the future, right? They're looking at strategic planning. They're looking at all these things. So the level of flexibility that needs to be in there is a lot, right? If they have a new product, you can't pick up a new product from the ERP because it doesn't exist yet in the ERP, right? Or you can't or if you're going to realign the business or restructure the business, that doesn't exist anywhere except where finance is creating it, right? And what the costs will look like in different business units if they move things around and such, et cetera. So that modeling capability for FP&A is really something that needs a lot of flexibility. And that's, I think, why you end up with at some level, that's why you end up with so much Excel, right? Because Excel is the most flexible, probably the most flexible tool in the world, right? The problem is the maintenance of it afterwards, right? But it allows that, right? So I think that all of those things kind of wrap together, and a finance person's much more willing to just keep working with Excel, because and the other thing is most of them haven't worked with anything else in their career, so they're very comfortable with it, right? So I think there's a lot of those things that go to it.
No, I think that's a very good point. And yeah, let's be honest, when you're having to say no for others for spending on technology and then you go out and buy the latest and snazzy technology, there is a
Exactly.
little bit about drinking your own champagne, isn't there?
Right.
But
That's right.
also but I also think, that rigor that you put your sales and your marketing team through in terms of the why they're making these change. Once
Yeah.
you do that with your finance team, that
Yeah.
really drives the reason for change, doesn't it? And I think
Yes.
that's a skill that we haven't developed enough in finance, is actually ROI development and business case development. I think it's something that, we could do more of. And yeah, so that we're more able to assess, where we should be putting our money and where we should be investing.
I agree 100%. And ultimately, finance is one of those things everybody says it's non-revenue generating and things like that, but it is income. It can be income generating, right? Because it can
Mm,
prevent you from making a lot of bad mistakes. It can tell you where it can do a lot of the analytics that other places just don't have the desire to do, or capability to do, because they don't see the whole picture.
mm.
Finance really can do those things. And I think there's always that kind of, to get to that point, there's a lot of investment, right? If you really want to truly make excellence there. And that's where people get scared off, right? Because they're not as sure of the outcome, that they can get to that level of kind of financial excellence or financial team excellence. So,
Yeah, and that's a really great point. We talk a lot about the value. If you speak to any sort of CFO or a leader in the
mm,
executive team, that a lot of they want their decisions to be based around data. They want to be able to make great data decisions, but that obviously comes at a cost, both in terms of technology, but also the process change and change management. So
mm, mm.
how do you work with clients to help them understand almost the value of investing in data technologies to drive better decision making?
Yeah, I think with our clients, we're actually pretty um we're pretty gentle as far as that goes. I think we usually will look at what they're doing and then offer solutions around because I also think right now, where we are today, you're at kind of that, I mentioned Hyperion, and Hyperion's been around for 30 years or somewhere in that neighborhood, right? And the but you're in a position today where you're getting new technology. So like that whole Hyperion era, if you will, was performance management, right? And in that space, you talk about where we were. I think of the Hyperions and the Cognoses of the world as kind of performance management 1.0, right? And now you're into that kind of 2.0 space, or maybe 2.5. And then as we're adding machine learning and AI, you're even moving into 3.0, right? And that the capabilities today are way past what we thought they were. So I think you're looking at things. You're at a moment where right now you can talk to people about. You might not have known that you could do this like that, or with this tool you could do this or something like that. And I think that's true kind of across the board right now. There's just the capabilities are getting much more. The capabilities of the systems are getting well beyond what they were before. So you can have and perform a lot more tasks. And you can really, when you get into that ROI, you mentioned what is the ROI, and finance looking at the ROI of their operation. And, most of our customers aren't looking to cut finance headcount. They're looking to make it better and get more out of it, leverage it better. Right. So, right. They talk about, even in the name FP&A, right? The A stands for analyst or analytics, but they're most of the people that are in that roles are spending just so much time creating analytics, like formatting Excel, like you said, those works of art in the Excel workbooks. They're getting they're spending all their time creating those, not necessarily using them or analyzing them. They're just creating these data, works of art. And I think what they really want to do is not necessarily get rid of that person, but transform that person so that there's more time to actually analyzing versus creating. And I think that that's capable to do nowadays. And I think that there are so many other smaller processes that can be taken up for things. I mean, you think about the world we live in now. Like for instance, deferred revenue. 30 years ago, how many people had deferred revenue as a big chunk of their business? I'm sure there were industries out there that had some, right? But today, almost everyone has deferred revenue, right? So I mean, like but you're probably still tracking it on Excel sheets, or something like that, right? And it's just that's not efficient, And so, but there are systems that'll do that for you, and it'll wrap right into your analytics. So I just, those types of things. There's so many more things now that are out there that you can take advantage of that you might not have been able to do before. So a lot of the times, what we do when we're with customers is talk about, actually, you could do this with this tool, or with this other tool could actually do this as well. Because that's the other trap you fall into with technology. Well, I bought this to do this specific function. It's like, okay, but that it'll do that, but it'll also do these other 6 things or whatnot. And, you might want to do it for that. And of course, everybody loves to buy new toys, so they want their 5 other things to do those 5 other functions, right? But you can leverage a lot of the technology today to do so many multiple things that I think that it might be a significant investment for some of these tools, but they do a lot more than people kind of give them credit for and think about, right? And so, most of what we do is really more educational. We're not necessarily pushing analytics or pushing something on a customer. We're more just, this is what it's capable of. And I think most people are looking for that education right now because of the speed of change.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was on a customer success story, so I love it because I get to speak to customers while they're making a decision, and then after they've been through the process and like
Yeah.
sort of do the analysis. And she literally said to me, and I think I've got it recorded on the video actually, I didn't actually believe you're going to be able to do everything that you said you could do. It sounded like a pipe dream. And then my favorite comments, I've had it twice. I've had 2 customers literally say, actually, the bit that surprised me most is that it did what you said it would do. And because
Yeah.
that's one of the questions, like, what are the things that surprised you most about the solution that we put in? And
Yeah.
2 of them came back and said that it actually worked the way you said it would. So, and because because you can, there's so many horror stories out there about technology. I
Yes.
think that
Yeah.
and I find people fall into one of 2 camps. Either the middle ground, either they're really cynical and they don't believe it's going to deliver what you're going to say,
That's
or
right.
they think it's going to literally take the cup to the tea maker and make the cup of tea while serving up your revenue recognition reports. So you've got people in both camps. Some people think it's going to do the world, and others not sure it's going to do anything. So it's having those great conversations to make sure that you've got the balance and the honesty. And I really liked your comment about not trying to have too many tools, because like you say, so many tools have so much capability that people don't even know is there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think the other thing about that is if you're buying a different tool for each piece, that probably means you're under investing in the change management aspect, right? Because
Mm.
if people really understand the tool and learn about the tool, some of our best innovation comes from customer questions. Like, do you think it could do this or what have you? We learn from our customers too. And I mean, I think that that's great. But if you really have people learning the tool, feeling comfortable in the tool, they'll apply it to other things, right? So if you
Yeah.
like, that's how you mentioned that that it did what it said it would do, and that's always a great. I agree with you. That's a great feeling when a customer says that, or like it does everything I wanted it to. Like that's really that's the gold standard, right? And but like when they come back and tell you you know what, it's doing that great, but could it do this also? That means that the change management piece went really, really well and they really, really got it. And so that's another one I love to hear too. If they come back to us and say, hey, what if it could do this? Then that we did the change management piece correctly. They're really adopting it and things like that, right? So that's another one I love.
Yeah, no, I love. I'm a big believer that, tech. I think there is a tendency for people to look at this as a project versus a journey that they're going on.
Yeah.
And I'm because loads of technology now has it's cloud based, automatically upgraded. So if you just think about that, the point of that initial implementation versus, okay, how am I going to continue to maximize the life of this software?
Yeah.
That's my other piece is like, okay, so it's not just about what you can do now and what the software can do now, it's what it's going to do in 6 months, because like you say, AI, it's changing everything that
Yeah.
we're working with right now. It's going so
Yep.
fast, which is, you know
Yeah, and
eh,
actually you bring up a great point because you know what, when I think about things like, if I'm sitting with a potential customer and I'm talking to them and you can predict kind of the success that they're going to have based on what they're asking. And
yeah,
when you go to that, when you see somebody that's like, well, for phase one, we're just going to do a little piece, we're just going to do the bare bones or whatever. Then we'll come back and do phase two and phase three. Then because that speaks to the fact that they see it as a journey as well, right? And
yeah.
so that's an educated customer, and they, like that's one of my. I always try to tell customers, look, cut down phase one. Don't try to jam everything in. Find out if you even like the tool, and then let's talk about what's next and things like that. Because if you try to jam everything into one piece, you're putting too much. You're putting too much weight on the success of that one phase, right? Whereas if you just kind of realize that this is going to be a long-term journey and eventually you'll get to where you want to be, then you're much more likely to find success.
I like, honestly, anyone that's listened, I call it the snowball effect, right? You create
Yeah,
almost the capacity for change, right? You've got to
exactly.
shove the first one off the hill, but as you roll
Yeah,
down it, right,
that's
it
right.
gets bigger and
That's
bigger.
right.
You create capacity.
Right. And so
So
make it go and so make it enough that you can push it down the hill. Don't make it this massive thing that you can barely move, right?
yeah, or it
Give it its
starts to
own
roll back
momentum.
down the hill the other
Right.
way, right?
Exactly. 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 So yeah, no, it's that's important, really important. Because you're what do they say about first impressions, right? And
Yeah.
that when you're doing a project and you're implementing a new tool, that is the first impression, whatever you release first, right? So just make it go smoothly. That's more important than that it has everything under the sun, right? You want it to go smoothly. Bite off a little small piece and do that and do it well, and then people will give it a chance to do more, right, as you go forward. So that's another great. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. Just give it momentum, push it down the
Yeah.
hill.
Yeah, and I love that because I think I think people underestimate the power of small change. And small doesn't
Yeah,
have to be tiny, right? It doesn't have, but it has to be big enough to be impactful, but small enough that it's achievable. And I don't know about
yes,
you, but I am very rarely called into finance teams where they're all sitting around bored and got loads to do. Right.
yeah,
They're already under pressure, and then we're going to add a
yeah,
system change or, a new
yeah,
implement or transformation project. So that's the bit I always say to them is like, you guys, your team are already busy. How do we make them less busy so they have time to change so that we could
yeah.
actually get this going?
Yeah, that's exactly right, and it's super important. So yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So we've talked a lot about transformation and change, but you obviously
Yeah,
came from the world of Hyperion and performance management and performance
yeah.
analytics. So tell us a little bit about how you've seen that change over the years.
That's that's a great question, and I was actually talking. I forget who I was talking to recently, and they were talking about something about like vendor positioning or something like that. It was nothing to do with a conversation like this, but it just got me. This makes me think of that, and it's as you go, we've gone through it. You know, this kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier about finance being kind of a unique department and area, right? And because if you go through kind of this standard IT practice, finance needs that a little bit because they need to be, kind of going back to that audibility and things like that. But at the same time, when they're choosing a tool, they should be involved in choosing the tool. It shouldn't be an IT decision because, kind of going back to some of the things we were talking about. they need the flexibility that's different than any other department. They have certain requirements that other departments just don't have, and because of that, they know what they are. So I think when they're purchasing a product, they need to be involved. They can't let IT run out and buy something for them, right? We need a new performance management system. No, IT will go get that for you. No, that's not where you should be taking this. The finance team should be present and involved in picking it out for them. And I think that goes a long way towards some of the other things we just talked about, change management, et cetera, et cetera. But I think right now, I think you're seeing that positioning happen better. In the early years, you had Hyperion was really selling to finance, but then you had other companies like some of their competitors that were selling to IT, right? And then when of course, Hyperion got acquired by Oracle, so you see Oracle's always really selling more towards IT because they're just an enormous software company, right? That's what they do. But really you want the finance involved, right? And so right now you're seeing a lot more financial systems that are being developed by more financial people, and that gives you a lot of that flexibility, and that allows a lot more capability, and they kind of understands the change management piece of it. They understand the flexibility needs, things like that. So you're starting to see. I feel like you're starting to see this. I think that there was, in the mid teens, if you will, there was a study that I think it was Ventana Research or somebody did some study or something like that about, people weren't as happy with their performance management solutions as they thought they'd be, right? Going back to it did what you said it could do, right? They didn't think that. But I think now you're kind of in that 2.0 or even past that, where you're seeing so much more flexibility that people are actually getting excited about it, and people are excited about it, and they're open to this change, and they're seeing a lot of change. So it's kind of a little more fruition, and I think that that's great. So I think where we are with performance management is kind of, we are finally achieving what we thought it could be, and we're on the cusp of achieving so much more with it. Because as you add in AI and more machine learning, you're going to see even more benefits from it, right? That, like, again, I think you go back to your snowball, right? The first time we tried to push it off the hill, it didn't really get going, and now it's really starting to roll. And I think you're getting, like, the benefits you can see from it are starting to be leaps and bounds. They're not just, well, it doesn't take as long to create this report. Now you're starting to see a lot more, like, intelligence come out of it. It's picking up so many more things than it could have years and years ago, that it's giving so much more value.
No, absolutely. And I think that, that's the big thing, is that I think technology is now in a position where it can do the things that not we hope, but we're almost expecting it. I also think that the expectations of consumers are changing, right?
Yes.
The expectation, I speak to loads of executives, like, how do we not already have dashboards and reporting at our fingertips? There's kind of that expectation that
Yeah.
finance will provide this. So I actually think that's what's driving a lot of the transformation that we're seeing
I
at the
would agree
moment.
with that. Yeah, I would totally agree with that, because they want, like, finance more and more wants to own it,
Yeah.
because that's what they want to do with it. But I also think that there's the capability is there now for them to do that, right? Before, it kind of had to be owned by IT, just because there were so many technical things that had to be accomplished around it, right? And now you're seeing, especially with the advent of the cloud, things are so much simpler, right? I mean, the expectation today when you buy a piece of software is that you turn it on and it works, right? Like, these long implementation cycles, or all of these things that go into it, right? That they're not expected anymore. And those implementations now really, they're not as technical as they were before. They're much more transformative, right? They're much more around transformation. How do you want to do things? Not let's see what we can configure to kind of do it the way you want it, right? Now it's much more around, let's just spend the time teasing out exactly what you want. Because it doesn't take as long to put together the technology itself.
Now, for the £1 million question. What is the best finance software for your business? Is it A, Sage 50? Is it B, Sage 200 Standard? C. Sage 200 Professional? Or D. Sage Intact? An impossible question to answer without a lifeline. But we have the perfect lifeline for you. Our free quiz, Which Sage Product is Right for You, will tell you which product is the best fit for your business in just 5 minutes. All you need to do is head to www.itassolutions.co.uk and answer a few simple questions.
No, I think it's great. I think I'm really excited about that, and I think you're starting to see. And you know what? This kind of brings me back to the beginning of our conversation, right? You were talking about investment and things like that, and part of I think which we didn't talk about was part of the thing of the investment side of it was I haven't seen the results, right? You stop investing in things when you haven't seen the results you were expecting, right? And now you're starting to see those results. And so will that drive more more investment? And I think it probably will because the capabilities are there. You're kind of meeting that whole kind of expectation capabilities are starting to come together, right? And so it provides that launching point.
100%. And it's one of the conversations. So I got asked to do a presentation on, what makes a successful transformation project. And one of my big things is always set the expectations with your stakeholders. And I don't mean your internal finance team. I'm talking about the rest of the organization. Because if you set yourself up with, within 3 months, every team's going to have a dashboard. It's going to look like this, and you're going to have all your data at your fingertips and everything's going to be perfect and rosy. You're setting yourself up in a position where you've got might be achievable, but it's a really high standard to hit. Whereas if you take that phased approach, and set the the stakeholder expectations to, right, our first thing is we need to get our ship in order, and we need to make sure everything is sorted. And then we're going to roll out in a phased approach, dashboards and reporting in this way to this team. I think that is when you start because they start to feel it and see it. You're also not got them banging at your door. So for me, stakeholder management is an underutilized area of transformation. People don't do
Totally
it.
agree. Totally, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. The other thing is, along those lines, let's be clear about what we're investing in and why. Because a lot of times you'll also have the stakeholders who might have approved the budget or the investment, but they have one specific thing they want out of this.
Yeah.
And then throughout the process, the people that requested it may have something different. And they see the ROI in one way, but the person that, the stakeholders who approved it might not see it that way. Right. And so you got to be really clear about everybody's expectation. And, this kind of goes back to that kind of successful clients and not successful, it's nice when they're all in agreement of what they're looking to get out of this. Right. That, and I mean, it sounds so simple, but I know you've been there too. You've seen this, right? Where like the organization itself isn't really 100% aligned on what they're going to get out of this. Right. So you're putting a lot of burden on that success right out of the bat if not everyone is in agreement of what they're doing. And so I mean that's important. It's stakeholder alignment and expectation setting, and it has to be across the entire usually a steering committee, but also all the way down to the people that are involved in the project every day. Everybody's going to be working for the same goal.
And what I find really interesting, especially and I would echo what you were saying about implementation. Like we're talking weeks/months for implementations. I remember the days when it was years to get any kind of system change in, right? You wait years now and you're already behind you're massively behind the curve, if not the entire platform. But now what I find really interesting is that because I don't know whether it's because of COVID and what happened there, but there's a lot more movement, I think, within finance that I've not seen since I started consulting in finance, 10, 15 years ago, where we're seeing people move from job to job, rather than sort of be in a role for 10 years and maybe see one implementation. What we're starting to see is, people shifting roles, doing 18 months, 2 years just to do an implementation and shifting on to the next. And then what you've got is that, kind of going back, is that they're not clear, because the same person may be finishing the project, then, a different person that started the project versus the ones that are finishing it. They've not maintained the comms as they've gone through. And so the expectations changed, and then they haven't communicated that well. So that's also really interesting. That's something I'm very mindful of, because obviously when you see that change in people, it's like, have we understood what we're trying to achieve in this project, even though we've had a change of staff?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And it's hard. And the other thing is, it's not just the people that are moving, right? It's the companies are driving some of this movement, right? Because, and I don't know if it's COVID, but during that time, everybody talks about how the labor market got tighter, and it did, but companies also got a little bit, they're not going to pick up an extra position just to have an extra position, right? They kind of ratcheted down things too, right? And so the other thing that I see a good bit is they might hire a consulting firm to do the project, but then they might augment their staff with some temporary labor. And so, but then again, it leads to the same problem. Like, that person, are they invested in the same thing that the leadership that, is in making this investment wants out of it? And do they understand it? And, do they have kind of like a stake in that? And that can drive its own set of issues, right? So
well, they do say, I think it was Gartner came out with the stats around transformation, and that if you have the team that are actually going to be using the system and that actually involved in the system versus consultants, the success rates go through the roof, right?
Yes.
And that's the piece, isn't it? It's just, I see consultants as facilitators, guiders, and and sharing best practice, but you have to. Customers have to get involved. They can't just sit on the sidelines and be handed something.
Yeah. And that was one of my big things at the beginning. The first question you asked, I mean, the customer involvement is huge. You can't say it enough. But a lot of people just feel like they're going to turn this over to a consulting firm and then get back the answer. And that's not what's going to happen.
You might get back an answer, whether it's the answer that you need that on one.
You're right. You'll get an answer, but you might not understand it. So it's very important. It's very important. So
brilliant. Well, we're rapidly coming to the end of our time together, Alex, and I continue to say it's been a great session. So for those that are perhaps considering transformation, if we haven't scared them off and petrified them, what are your top tips to a successful transformation project?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about them today, right? Get involved, bite off, only bite off what you can chew, right? So just get the ball in motion, and this is a journey, not a one-time thing. And those are the big two. Like I said, I believe change management is probably number 3 or whatnot. And if you concentrate on those 3 and get those 3 right, you'll be successful. Right. After that, I mean, I'm sure there's other things you got to look to, right? But those 3 are my top 3. So
amazing. Well, thank you so much, Alex. So if our listeners have enjoyed this conversation and want to learn more about yourself and what Mindstream does, where can they find you?
They mindstreamanalytics.com. That's our website. I'm on there, and then I'm also on LinkedIn is Alexander Ladd. So feel free to reach out. I do try to get to all my email and things like that, but sometimes it takes a little while.
I can imagine. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Genuinely enjoyed this session. And of course, we'll put all of the links you mentioned into the show notes. So thank you to our listeners. Thanks for joining me. If you have enjoyed this session, perhaps you've got a list of questions you think that Alex and I should do another session on them, please do reach out with them. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review, leave us a comment, and tell us what you'd like us to do more of. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining me on today's show. And thank you to our listeners for listening. Speak soon, guys. So for those of you that don't know what we do here at ITAS, so we are a financial transformation consultancy that specialises in Sage technologies, whether that is looking at a new solution, evaluating your current solution, or just helping you to get the most out of your current setup, we can help. But rather than me tell you all the reasons that you should consider working with us as a Sage partner or a transformation consultancy partner, I'm going to let our customers do the talking for us.
ITAS were there from the sort of get-go, helping us, talking through what the process was going to involve, setting expectations, making it clear that how much work we were going to have to put in to make sure that the project was a success at the end. And then talking us through all our different options, looking through our current processes, making us reevaluate what was important, which elements we wanted to move across to the new system, how we wanted to configure our new system, and also kind of making us sit back and really think about what is the success of this project. When we get to the other end, when we finish the implementation and we're in the system, what's success going to look like? And actually, putting that question back to us and really making us sit down and think about what is it that we are looking to gain from this whole process was really useful internally, making us really think about the key objectives and which areas to maybe prioritize over others. It was also really helpful sitting down and thinking about it rather than one big, huge project, actually splitting it down into different phases, sort of smaller bite-sized chunks, which made it seem a little bit more achievable within the time. And then thankfully, ITAS have been super flexible with us during this process because it happened to coincide our implementation with our first ever financial audit, which just took up huge amounts of our time that we didn't expect. So we did have to slightly push back some of our go live dates, and thankfully ITAS were accommodating and actually helped us navigate through that process. And like to say that thankfully we're out the other side of our first phase of go live, and loving the move to Intact.